and welcome back to Hindustan Astrology. I'm Katya, and in today's video, I have back my dear mentor, Dr. Santhip Kanholy. Thank you so much for joining me again, Santhip ji.
Namaste, Katya.
Namaste. So in today's video, we're going to talk about Prashna. Now, what is that? Prashna is horary astrology. This means that the question that you ask is based on the current transit chart. At the exact minute and second that you ask it, you draw a chart. And from that chart, you can discern, where the question is being answered. And because, the ascendant changes every 2 hours, it's all based upon the location of the astrologer. At least this is the way that I've been taught. Of the astrologer that's doing the work based on that location. And so you want to look at the first house and where that is, and then it kind of unfolds from there. Now, Santhip is going to go over his techniques for Prashna and how he uses them. Part of the reason I wanted to do this video is that I have a kind of tenuous relationship with Prashna. I'm not sure if I like it. Sometimes I like it and sometimes I don't like it. And this is because it's very fickle. It seems to only work half of the time, whereas the transits work about 75% of the time. So in my mind, I'm like, why on earth would I go with something that has a lesser percentage rate of being correct, right? Like, to me, it's like, if you don't understand the transits and mundane astrology, then you have to rely upon Prashna because you don't see the full picture. You know what I mean? So my experience has been, it's kind of a cheat, it's kind of like the shortcut way to astrology. And I don't like that. I'm very traditional. I'm Pushya, I'm a Pushya Lagna. So I like things very traditional and done the right way and systematically. And, so my experience with Prashna is that it worked one time really well for me, whereas other times it was very vague. And so in this video, I'm hoping that Santhip ji can convince me to use Prashna more often. So with that, without further ado, let's take a look at Santhip's techniques for Prashna.
Great, Katya. So, I wanted to actually talk a little bit on Prashna first. The reason being there's so much richness to Prashna, so much variety of Prashna techniques that are out there also. But first of all, you need to understand more about Prashna. So what exactly is Prashna? Is there more to it? Is there anything additional we would have to know about it? Things like that. So let me give you a background first on Prashna actually, So of course, the technique, as you said, one of the techniques which you mentioned is that of, say someone is having a pressing question and then the question is asked to the astrologer. The astrologer casts the chart at the particular moment. Now, there are many ways to cast the chart, so that also is like an introduction to the different kinds of Prashna that are out there. So one way to cast the chart is actually to look at the chart at that particular moment. The moment the question is asked, the astrologer looks at the Lagna at that particular point. You can understand what's out there. Now, in some cases, now here is where Prashna gets really interesting. Kerala, the land I'm from in India, the state in India. We have a rich history in the Prashna astrology. So Prashna astrology is kind of famous in Kerala, because you actually have a very ancient book called as Prashna Marga, which is considered as the Bible of Prashna astrology. As simple as that. So Prashna Marga originated from Kerala. So the astrologers here have been using that book for a really long time, and they have been giving predictions based on that book for a really long time also. There are very specific techniques, excellent techniques written in the Prashna Marga and so forth, So in fact, if you were an astrologer, you were expected to study that Prashna Marga from beginning to end. You had to know it from beginning to end before you could call yourself as an astrologer. And why is Prashna techniques very useful in the first place? So say you don't know your birth chart. You don't know what time you were born. You don't know where exactly your moon is and stuff like that. At that point, a Prashna chart could equally be very powerful to give you the answer also. So that's why Prashna techniques became quite popular, because most of the times in ancient India, they didn't know take care of their birth time and so forth. Only very elite people kind of knew the thing about using the birth chart and stuff like that. So many times Prashna was quite easy as a technique in astrology to
That blows
employ
my mind that, because the birth time is so important in Jyotisha.
Yeah.
It blows my mind that India doesn't record the birth time at most
Yeah,
of the
there are
hospitals.
people. Yeah, there are people. So you
That's
kind of have
crazy.
to. Yeah, well,
What?
in if you're, it's one of those things. Usually, you are lucky if you did have a horoscope made. There was some case like that in villages and so forth. But then there was a tradition in which they would actually look at the birth time. But the actual thing is that they'll say, oh, you're born between 6 and 7 a.m. or something like that. So that's inaccurate birth time. So that's a real problem also. And even recently, I had someone actually contact me recently, and they just said they don't know the birth time at all. They just know the nakshatra, which is the more popular way here in Kerala, where I'm from. They will focus on the nakshatra actually more than the tithi and all that. So that you have that. So they'll just come with their nakshatra at least. That's what they'll know. They'll know that they were, and even that also. Then they'll say my birthday is this day, but my nakshatra is this day. Then you do the actual thing. So what happened was that one of the reasons is that in maybe 40, 50 years ago, they did not have this history of like keeping accurate birth certificates and so forth. You would just, the only reason you would put in the birthday was to actually get your SSLC or 10th grade certificate, which was very important for government documentation and stuff like that. So if you passed your high school, basically you would show that certificate in government offices and so forth. So many times they would actually change the birth date so that they would get these the children who could enter into schools also easily. So normally if you are 5 years of age, that's when you are allowed into the first standard and first grade and so forth here. So that kind of thing you could override that easily by changing the birth date of your child. So that you'd be surprised, that kind of thing. That used to happen a lot actually. So it's one of those things.
So that would make sense that people would use Prashna because they don't know the birth time. So
yeah, exactly that. Yeah. So that's one big reason why. And of course, and there are many techniques around that also. In fact, you can use Prashna even otherwise also. You might know the birth time, but you can still use it. But but the other aspect of Prashna is that Prashna is actually and in Kerala is very famous for the Prashna technique called as the cowrie shell technique, in which you would have 108 cowrie shells. You have this conch shells of sorts, the seashells which you would get, this tiny kind of white seashell which you get from the sea, and you would actually you would have 108 of them, and then the Prashna, the astrologer would be asked a question. And then astrologer would, when the question is asked, astrologer would actually, pray upon his gods, invoke his gods and all that. You'd invoke Ganesha, Saraswati, his Ishta Devata, all that. His guru's blessings would be sought. And then finally that question will be put in the mind. And then finally he would grab a number of shells in his hand, and then he would count how many shells he has grabbed. So for instance, you will see like, say, okay, this shell is he has grabbed 23 shells right now. So then he would keep on removing 12 shells from that. So you remove 12 from 23, you're left with 11. So now the 11th shell is indicating the 11th sign as being the Lagna. So now Aquarius becomes the Lagna of the Prashna. And then he will look at the current transit chart, he would make Aquarius as the Lagna, and then he would make prediction based on that. So that's actually the cowrie shell technique. That's a very simple technique. So it was traditional for astrologers to have their own cowrie shells and so forth. In fact, that was a graduation thing here. You graduated as an astrologer when you got your own cowrie shell, and then you could go on and cast your own cowrie shell based Prashna and so forth. Now, what is interesting in this cowrie shell Prashna is that you are not relying upon the Lagna of that moment. You are using the cowrie shells, which is kind of like, and cowrie shell is also very specific, having some specific things there. It is coming from the ocean. So you are accessing the more Piscean kind of energy there. That's the easy way to think about it. And then you can easily capture that energy using the cowrie shell and answer some questions in an easy way also. That's a simple thing. Now, of course, different cultures all over the world have different shell-based techniques to answer. Like even in the Pirates of Caribbean, the crazy lady in one of the series was actually casting shells to give a prediction. She was looking at the shells to make predictions for Jack Sparrow and all that, right? So it's something similar to that, but here you have an actual system around it. So the cowrie shells was actually used to determine the lagna. Now, in some cases, some astrologers even suggest that you can just ask someone to say a number from 1 to 12.
That's what Simon does. Yeah. Simon
Yeah.
Chikorsky, my teacher, he does.
Yeah.
He does both. He uses the lagna from his location.
Yeah.
He asks them to pick a number for the first question. And then if there's a second question, then you have to use the sound of the nakshatra. Like whatever the first word of the sentence is, you use that first sound and then you use that nakshatra as the lagna.
Yeah, in fact, that is a completely pure technique also. That's a completely different technique. That's an actual technique that is also integrated, in which you look at the first sound of that particular coming from that particular person to determine the lagna also. So you can use the nakshatra. Say I'm saying okay, then O becomes the first sound, or you're saying even namaste, and then na becomes the first sound, and then you would identify the nakshatra pada linked with that particular sound. And that becomes the lagna, and then you can.
It's really good to understand. I mean, even not just for prashna, but to understand what sounds go with what nakshatra, because you can use it with your yogi point or your part of fortune, whatever. I know I found, well, I mean, you and I have another friend named Sandeep in Vedic astrology. And it's so funny how both of you, I resonate really well with you as far as learning. And that sound, SA, is Shatabishak, and my Rahu's right there. So it's like people in your life, you will find the sounds showing up everywhere. Now, isn't that something to do with the goddess Vidya?
Yeah, definitely. It's got a lot of things to that. So in fact, the sound, if you carefully look at the sound itself, it is a technique. It is a space where mantras exist. When you are chanting mantras, you are creating or dealing with sound vibrations. So it's a very powerful system by itself. There is an already mature system with sounds already in place. And then if you connect that with the astrology part, or if you identify the connection, it makes it a very powerful thing. So in fact, it's a very powerful system, just looking at the sound. There's a lot of things you can do with sound. In fact, you'll be surprised, everything. Look at the sound of your people in your life. Look at the sounds connected with your spouse, with your children, with your parents,
your
with your
cryptocurrency.
uncles, cousins. Yeah, could be. Now, again, you can extend that to the...
My yogi point is at DO, and that's Dogecoin. I was like, oh yeah, I'm buying Dogecoin for sure.
yeah, exactly that.
I'm just waiting. I'm just hodling right now. I'm just waiting for the market to go back up. I think it's going to go back up after September. But anyway, that's another story. But the sounds are really important. I mean, And so, but the way Simon does it is that's the second question.
Yeah.
So
no, that's
or the number they choose.
Yeah. Right.
The second question is the sound.
Right. So that's a completely fine technique. That's a completely independent technique by itself. Also, you can ask that question just based on the sound coming from the the first person. The first sound coming from a person is a relevant way to use that technique. The other way to use that technique is to identify the main. Say the person is asking a question about a different person, for instance. Okay, I want to know more about my husband. I want to know more about my son. Look at that particular sound, the name of that particular child or the name of the particular person in the birth chart. At that point, you can get some more clues there also.
Oh, it's so accurate. And I'll put the link, you guys, down in the information box where to find the chart online, because I have it open on my laptop 24/7. It's a tab that is always open because I want to memorize it, and I always have questions. What is this nakshatra? What is that nakshatra? I'm a musical person, and to me, it's all about the sound and the frequency. So it's such a good resource, but that's something that I know that that is used.
In fact, that's a very completely. It's actually one of the parts of the analysis. Actually, so remember, like you can do that in many ways. So there's the aspect of asking one question or the continuing questions also, and there are many techniques various astrologers have evolved to deal with the same thing. Now, in some cases, the astrologer. So traditionally, you go to a covericial astrologer, you would ask a question, he would see what the situation is, he would suggest some remedies. Okay, you should do this, go appease this goddess, do a puja for Ganesha, chant this mantra for Vishnu and all that. And then he would do one more prashna. He would actually do the kaurishal again, just to see if the remedies that was suggested is a perfect solution to this chart. And then now he would actually again do the same thing, and then he would pull the conventions and he would look at it again. And then he will see, okay, now if the Lagna is in a better position right now, or Jupiter is aspect in Lagna, the planet that is in question is in 10th house, something good stuff like that. Then he will say, okay, you know what, whatever I suggested is fine, you should go ahead and do it. That kind of thing. So it's a very, so then you see, now what was interesting, there was an actual lecture I actually attended in Sedona conference actually. So there was a lady there, I forget the name. She was a Westerner, Linda or Lindsay or something like that. Linda McKay or something like that. She was a Western woman who actually studied the cone shell technique of Prashna. She came down to like South Kerala and studied it from an astrologer there. And she actually demonstrated it there. It was very interesting because I remember she wanted to start her lecture exactly at 8:31 a.m. instead of the 8:30 a.m. She said 8:31 a.m. was much more auspicious to begin the lecture. And so I was like, yeah, great. So we are dealing with a real astrologer, that kind of thing. So what is interesting is that she actually described, now what does this imply? That you can ask a question and the question is actually capable of being answered by this particular system. So even for the system to work, there should be some foundation around it. So she basically said that there is a field of information that you can access using certain techniques to derive the actual light to the situation. So that's a very important thing. So Prashna, the whole Prashna astrology is foundation of that system is based on this particular existence of this field. And there are very specific ways how you can access this field. Now, of course, different intuitive psychics and so forth will access this field in very powerful ways. They can have their own ways and methodologies and so forth. In astrology, you are using astrological tools to access the information field. That is what is actually happening. Of course. So that is one kind of prashna, in which this is the kaurishal prashna as it's called in Kerala. Now the other kind of prashna is something called as beetle leaf prashna. In which say the question is complicated. Then the astrologer would say, okay, go and buy a bunch of beetle leaves and come back to me. So they'll go and buy these beetle leaves. And they will actually come back with these beetle leaves and give that to the astrologer. Now, astrologer will count the number of beetle leaves, and then he would identify a lagna based on a total number. So basically, it is again something like the remainder of 12 and so forth. So sometimes, in addition, the beetle leaf prashna has a different set of calculations to calculate the lagna from the kaurishal prashna. The prashna marga gives a different set of calculations for it. I forget the actual one right now because I don't use that much, but then it's something like the total number of leaves plus 1 divided by 12 or something like that. And you check for the remainder or something like that. It's something like that, some variation like that. The key thing is that you look at the beetle leaf, you have a prashna chart indicated where the lagna is calculated directly from the beetle leaf. And then once the lagna is calculated, then the next thing which the astrologer does is interesting. He keeps a prashna chart in mind, and then he looks at the beetle leaves one by one. He'll say, okay, he'll look at the first beetle leaf, and then he will say, okay, this beetle leaf is in good shape. There is nothing going on with this beetle leaf. It's completely fine. So your health is fine, or your first house is okay. Then he'll look at the second beetle leaf. He'll say, okay, second beetle leaf, there is a hole there's a slight tear on the right side, but on the top of the right side, there's a slight tear there. And then that means you're having a financial problem, probably coming because it's from the right side. There's some problems come with career, some problems around money, around government authorities, something like that. And then they'll say, yeah, that is seen in the Prashna. So that is being. So third leaf, they say. Then they say, okay, you have a hole in the beta leaf. They'll say, okay, your younger sibling is having a serious problem with his health.
Wow.
So they'll say that. And then they'll go on. So fourth house, they'll look at the fourth leaf and say, okay, fourth house, let's look at that. And they'll say, okay, fourth house, there's again, say there's a tear back somewhere there. They'll say that, your house is having a problem. You need to fix that. This particular part needs to be fixed and all that, and so forth. So you do go through the astrology, would basically go through 12 houses. Astrology will go through 12 houses and through the leaves, actually. Now that's a complete system. You have a complete system there. In fact, it is a very powerful system in which you make predictions for the entire family who is present there.
That's so interesting, because where I live, we have 11 acres and like right now it's butterfly season. Mm-hmm. And I always pay attention to the butterflies that have pieces of their wings missing. I'm like, oh, you got into a battle. And, that's the nimitta part where, I'm thinking something and then see that butterfly with a broken wing. And I'm like, oh, that's a sign.
No, 100%. You can, I'm sure, 100%. If astrologers, if there is a system in which you can use a bunch of leaves to make predictions, 100% you can use living animals to make predictions. I'm not surprised by that at all. You can, in fact, what thought you're thinking, look at the animals around you. Look at what are the animals coming into life.
Today, my husband found a hawk feather. I said, oh, well,
yeah.
In Native American animal medicine, hawk is messenger.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly that.
So pay attention. You better, check your junk mail folder. There might be a message that you're missing.
Yeah. So it's like that. So the animals and birds can sometimes deliver very powerful messages. And there's a whole system of animal totems around it also, right? There's a whole system around that. Native Americans have their own thing. You see a buffalo versus you see a peacock or whatever, right? So a coyote, for instance, So that's a complete system there. You have an already inherent system where they have identified the way to access the information field that is capable of answering your question. That is the easy way to identify that. Native Americans did not have bitter leaf around, but they had animals around. So they could easily identify the question from there. Yeah.
Right now we have what are called the brood X cicadas, and they're a 17-year cycle cicada. So they only hatch every 17 years. And there are like trillions of them. And it's similar to locusts in that they swarm, but they don't eat things like locusts. So it doesn't hurt the vegetation. It's just really annoying. And they're really loud. But I've noticed their leaves are so beautiful. I mean, not their leaves, their wings are so beautiful. And just like a butterfly, there'll be pieces taken out or whatever.
Right. Yeah, so you'll have to see that. So of course, you'll have to make observations around it, and which is what happens during your day when you deal with, like, when you get a hawk feather, for instance. What happens during the day when you get a cicada? What were you thinking about when you see a broken cicada versus seeing a complete cicada and all that? So there's you can derive your own system, 100%. You'll see this when the same thing happens again and again. Then you have to make a note of it that becomes part of your system. No doubt about that. Of course, the third kind of prashna, which I want to introduce, which is which I believe is one of the strongest aspects of prashna in Kerala, I can definitely say, is something called as the Swarna Prashna. Swarna Prashna is basically a Swarna Prashna.
Can you spell that?
Swarna and Prashna.
Swarna.
So, Swarna actually translates to gold Prashna. So now that is considered as the king of Prashna. That is the king of the Prashna techniques. So in this technique, so it is an interesting technique in which so for instance, one of the Swarna Prashna events. Now this is a big event. Normally this is done for families, for entire families, or sometimes this is normally done just for temples and so. We'll talk about either of them. So normally what happens when it's done in families is that you would have 3 astrologers attending that Prashna. Now, there are 3 people who will be there in the Prashna. And then Swarna is, and it's basically part of what is called as the Ashtamangala Prashna. Ashtamangala is these 8 auspicious kind of doing Prashna. So you have to have 8 auspicious items as present. So now the auspiciousness of that event has been increased. And then you approach the question in 8 different ways. So it's called as an Ashtamangala Prashna. So Ashta is like 8 and auspiciousness is Mangala. So Ashtamangala. And then Swarna Prashna is basically an Ashtamangala Prashna. So that is basically that. Now in Swarna Prashna, what happens? Now remember, all Prashna is connected with how do you determine the Lagna to answer the question. That is what we have been discussing so far. In Swarna Prashna, a virgin child, a young boy or a young child, actually goes, a young girl, most preferably female usually. A girl has to, usually initially a puja is done, they actually do a puja, a ritual to purify invoke the gods, invoke the Navagrahas, and then they actually do a puja for the actual Rashi chart. The chart is now blank and empty. And then a young child is asked to go around the chart 3 times and supposed to place a gold coin he is carrying in one of the 12 squares. In the South Indian chart, there are 12 squares indicating 12 Rashis. A gold coin which is placed by this particular child in one of these Rashis, that becomes the Lagna of that particular Prashna. There's an actual thing.
So
you
for
actually
sure,
have this
this
thing.
is what was done at the royal court. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Now, in fact, the Swarna Prashna is supposed to literally give the king who asked this question enlightenment. It was as strong as that. In fact, it used to be like a 6-month process. But nowadays, a 6-month process to approach one particular Prashna is no longer practical. So they have reduced it to 3-day Prashna, 4-day Prashna, or sometimes a week-long Prashna also to analyze the causes and effects and so forth. Now, what usually happens is that once the Lagna, now why do they use a virgin child? Why do they use a young child? They say the young child is innocent. So the nature will actually express freely through that young child. That's why a young child will reflect the energies of the moment and easily capture the Lagna, using a gold coin. Now the astrologer will take away the gold coin. That is why it's called as Swarna Prashna. So, that is the thing going on. So what happens is that now, and this is something I witnessed myself, I happen to have attended one of the Swarna Prashna here also. And then what you see is that the astrologer will actually make predictions for everyone who is present in that gathering. So they'll say, for instance, someone will come and say, okay, my brother has been missing for many years. Will he come back? And the astrologer will look at the omens and make predictions for that. Someone will say, yeah, well, it's like a church. Yeah, it's like more like an astrological church. But
something that a lot of people I didn't even know this church existed until I was in college doing a research project. It's called the Psychic Science Spiritualist Church. And what they do is just like, they don't use Prashna or astrology, but the whole service is the preacher sitting up front giving readings to everybody. And they do it through channeling, but they have a whole congregation, so it's not like a one-on-one consultation. They sit there and they give readings to everybody. Yeah,
exactly that. So, but what is interesting is that usually they will kind of point out to the problems within the entire family. So they'll say, what are the problems, inherent problems within the family? They'll say, what are the karma associated with this particular family? They'll say, was there a woman who was mistreated, for instance? Was there someone who stole something from someone else? Was there some goddess who was mistreated in this particular family? In many cases, normally Swarna Prashna is done when there are deities involved, when there are gods and goddesses involved. Now, in India, you have this tradition where every household, every family might be linked with a god or goddess. So there might be a goddess. Perhaps your ancestors might have worshipped a goddess for a really long time, and their descendants were unable to follow that worship, and because of which you are facing specific kind of problems. So many times this kind of Prashna is done to identify the nature of the goddess that was worshipped. And then usually the remedies are suggested. Okay, you had one ancestor who was mistreated by the wife. So you had to go to this particular temple and do this particular puja to that particular deity. Okay, you had a fight, arguments between siblings, for instance. which is creating a karmic consequences. That needs to be remedied, rectified by going to the particular temple and so forth. So there are remedies that are suggested as part of that Prashna also, and normally they will also recommend addition of deities and so forth. Sometimes they will say, okay, the guru of your family is not having a position in your chart or in your home. So you need to have a separate shrine or a separate placement for the guru in the home. And guru, there's an actual concept called, okay, this is the seat of the guru. You might have a goddess seat here where you make prayers and so forth. Then you might have a different seat for the guru where you might make additional prayers and so forth. And sometimes they'll say the guardian, the guard for the goddess is having problems. And then they'll say the guard is basically not given a place, in the family. And then you might have to do a separate remedy for the guard also. Because they say if the guard is not being appeased, then, diseases are inflicted upon the family.
Not just the god, you need to do the deity's wife as well. That's what,
that's
what Dr. Dutta says. Dr. Andrew Dutta, he says, don't just do the mantra for the deity. No, you got to appease his wife too. Because
you have to do
until his wife's happy.
Yeah, you have to appease his wife. In fact, it's an easy thing I can say is to start appeasing the animals associated with the deities.
Right.
So, for instance, you have Shiva riding Nandi. Make a prayer to Nandi first and then make a prayer to Shiva. You'll find that prayer is much more easily satisfied, easily answered. Yeah, you can even make a prayer to Vishnu's Garuda first and then make a prayer to Vishnu. So you can see that is also quickly answered. You'll be surprised by that. You can see that actually. So it's like that. So coming back to that. So remember Swarna Prashna, right? So the intricacies are very interesting in the Swarna Prashna. The level of details that they go to in answering. Now this is a 3-day event. They'll say the whole history and so forth. They'll say this is where the particular deity came from, this particular direction. It's supposed to have a lot of land. That particular family gave this, passed down this deity and so forth. You identify the history of the deities actually. Now, what is making this Swarna Prashna very interesting is that the astrologer, if he lies in a Swarna Prashna, is supposed to have consequences, bigger consequences actually. So there's a real problem there. So you have to really know your thing. Otherwise you really enter into problem. Yeah, big karma. In fact, usually Swarna Prashna is, now like I said, they are used to heal entire families. And the remedy suggested
that's the thing. I mean, they're not just giving a reading, they're giving remedies. And that's what Simon told me too, because when I started my Umas Upayas brand, he said, oh, Upayas, remedies, you better be careful because you will take on the karma of the people that you give remedies to. I said, I don't think that's going to stop me though, because it's like that never stops a healer from healing.
Usually
we have to do the work, and you just have to protect yourself.
That's fine. Like you have to. In general, when you're giving the remedies, it is always a good idea to like invoke gods and goddesses. So like if a brand is called Uma's Upayas, you have to invoke Uma first and then give the Upaya. So it's not you giving the remedies, the goddess Uma giving the remedies.
Exactly. No, it's her.
It's
her. Yeah, I don't own any of this stuff.
Yeah, that makes it easy. So then you become just a channel
I don't want to get in trouble.
From the goddess and so forth. Yeah. There are ways about it. What he said is very true, but but you can go about it also. That's what normally astrologers does. He tries to place the responsibility upon the other field that is actually coming through. So he becomes a channel at that point, but he's using astrological techniques. So now the greatness of this Swarna Prashna technique is that it is actually employed in temples. And that's the thing. Now you don't. That's one thing that is making this very, very especially strong technique. Because you would say, how do you know if the deity of the temple is happy or not happy? Normally, they would do a Swarna Prashna like once every 12 years or once every 18 years or something like that. How would you identify if there is problems with the atmosphere of the temple? How would you identify if there is someone stealing from the temple and so forth? Or is there an energetic problem associated with the temple? So normally it is, in fact, this is why the astrologers in Kerala, they were actually called as Devaknya. Devaknya is someone who knows the wishes of the god. So Deva is God. Devaknya is someone who knows the god's wishes. So Devaknya, they were actually called as Devaknya because they knew the wishes of the gods. So in fact, when you do the Swarna Prashna in a temple, they say legends are like, okay, the treasurer is stealing money from this particular temple on these particular days, on these particular occasions. They'll just call it out like that. They'll say this particular deity does not like to be offered coconut as the prasad. He does not like to be disturbed by offering the coconut, by smashing the coconuts in front of them and so forth. So there was history like that. So for instance, there was one temple, a Hanuman temple, where it was famous for people who would come all over from different. It is a very small temple, and you would actually smash coconuts in front of the Hanuman to remove your obstacles. Of course, your obstacles got removed, but then eventually the Swarna Prashna revealed that this particular deity did not like it, because Hanuman is not the deity to whom you would smash coconuts. So Ganesha is the natural deity to whom you would do it. But this deity became famous because of that. But then eventually that ritual had to be removed from the temple, because that was revealed in the Prashna. And that Prashna revealed, this deity, there were other consequences that had to happen, that had to be taken care of if this particular coconut smashing ritual was done in that particular temple. In another temple, in some cases, when very old temples, when they do the Prashna, the main astrologer would say, the traditions here is fine. You don't need to change anything. The deity is content. The deity is happy. In some cases, they would say, well, in a smaller temple, they might go and say, well, there seems like there is an energy of a new deity here in this particular temple. So you might have to put in a new shrine for this particular deity in this particular temple. In some cases, they would say, depending upon the deity, they would give specific remedies. They will say, okay, you have a Naga kind of a shrine in your temple. A Naga shrine requires a border for that particular shrine or something like that. So you'll find all these very temple specific remedies, and that makes it very powerful as a science. Because in general, any Prashna technique or you use is capable of being expanded to those great heights. That is one thing I want to share here. So remember that of course, I introduced various kind of techniques, but know that any technique you use, you can expand it to those heights. You can look at one Prashna chart. You might not just give the readings for the particular person involved. You are capable of giving the readings for the entire family that is linked with that particular person. You might be capable of using one particular Prashna chart and literally saying what your ancestors might have happened or faced and so forth, what went through with your ancestors and so forth. So think about that. You are giving predictions for someone that happened 100 years ago, that lived 100 years ago. You're capable of doing that. Prashna charts are so powerful in that way. So remember that. It doesn't matter what technique, but you have to understand the potential there. Think about having the wishes of a deity in a particular temple being revealed to you. So that's extremely powerful thing. That makes you, in fact, the astrologer who does the Prashna for a deity is supposed to be blessed by that particular deity also. So then there is a blessing he or she can actually access at that time, and that's a very powerful thing also. But that's the other aspect to it also. Remember that the Prashna therefore is a very, very powerful system out there, extremely powerful system that is employed by very traditional astrologers still to the day. In fact, they say the whole Ashtamangala Prashna is a very, very powerful technique. That there are even historical records of astrologers being brought as far as the royal courts in Sri Lanka from Kerala, to actually have a Prashna all the way back to 8th century AD or something like that. So it's it's a very, very powerful system out there. So yeah, usually Prashna is vast also as a subject because of that. You have the betel leaf Prashna variation, you have the cone shell Prashna variation, you have the Swarna Prashna variation or the Ashtamangala Prashna variations also. Now, so because of which, there are astrologers who specialize in Prashna also. So they only do Prashna chart, they would not even look at the thing, they would not even look at a birth chart. In fact, it is customary of every astrologer to create a Prashna chart whenever you go and ask a question also. You might go with your birth chart, they might look at the birth chart and give prediction based on dashas and antardashas and all that. And they would also do a Prashna chart also at the same time. So in fact, that is a technique which I can recommend for everyone out there. Whenever you are looking at any birth chart, create a Prashna chart at that exact moment. And you try to see what events. Yeah,
You
I
do
used to do it. Then I used to do it. I encouraged for all my students to do this because I learned a lot. Then I advanced the technique further. So I don't do that particular thing anymore. But then you can actually do that. You can actually create a birth chart and then look at the Prashna chart simultaneously. Then what eventually happens?
I found that Prashna works best when you get told to look at the chart.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
if I'm doing astrology and my spirit guides come to me and they say, hey, you need to pull up the Prashna chart right now,
Yeah.
then I use it. But otherwise, it's not like an automatic thing for me because
Yeah.
it's got a 50-50 chance of being accurate.
That's a very good point. So let me elaborate further on that. Now they say one of the first things, if you read the Prashna Marga book, one of the first things any Prashna book will say is that they will actually say the querent should be sincere. And the querent should actually be sincere about the question and should be open to the wisdom of the astrologer. And then they actually give conditions for that also. Their querent should come with clothes, they should come with fruits, they should come with food, they should come with gold coins, silver coins, stuff like that. Gems, jewelry, all that. Now, usually, if someone came to greet an astrologer with all these items, the astrologer was required to actually answer the question. That was a tradition here, So, in fact, when you go to invite an astrologer to do a Sarna Prashna for the entire family, you are expected to go with like all good auspicious items, and you would hand over the auspicious items to the astrologer, and then only the astrologer would, honor your request. That was the way. So, in fact, when the question is sincere, and then there is also contact for the astrologer also. The astrologer has to be a good person, pure at heart, things like that.
Right.
And then
But being pure of heart, that comes back to yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That comes back to the ego. And what I found is that it's not about your ego. You can sit there and say, my heart is pure all day long. But if God is not ready to give you a message through Prashna, you're not going to get it. So that's my problem with it, is that people rely upon it because they think, oh, if I work on my ego, if I work on my heart, and it's all about me, and it's not. God has put down these patterns, and that's what's in the transits, right? So to me, you have to give a healthy respect to the transits, and then you say, okay, I'm open to spontaneity. I'm open to nimitta, right? And so I would listen for those moments when spirit comes to me and says, okay, look at it now. But until I get that message, I ain't looking at it. I'm going to go with the transits because that's the order and the pattern of the universe that you have to pay attention to, right? I mean, if you just rely upon spontaneity all the time, there's no order.
Yeah, remember, astrology is a vast subject. It's as vast as the ocean, So it's very natural for different kind of astrologers to specialize in different kind of techniques. Very, very natural. It's not everyone is going to be a Prashna astrologer. Not everyone is going to be a Sarna Prashna astrologer. And not everyone is going to be like an expert in KP. Not everyone is going to be an expert in mundane. Not everyone is going to be even like expert in many other things also. So so that's very natural. So it's very normal in astrology to actually pick and choose a field that you are interested in and work on that. That comes naturally to you. Just develop that further. You'll be surprised by the results. You might be able to use the same thing to give predictions for all kind of things, and that's completely fine. You might use just nakshatras, just the basis of nakshatras. You just look at the nakshatras. You can make predictions for it. Everything you can make for predictions for everything just because you know nakshatras. So Prashna just like that. So some people are good at Prashna. Usually, I've seen people with strong Mars and Mercury. They are natural at Prashnas.
Well, I have that, and I'm just.
So you have to recognize that. So it's like anything else. So it's how can you be a good dancer, right? So can you be a good dancer if you just dance for like 1 hour, I don't know, 15 minutes every day? Can you be a good dancer like that? You can't. You have to practice it. So Prashna is just like that. So it's like you have to practice it for some time. So of course it will take its own pain and so forth and all that. It has its own efforts also. But like I said, once you understand the technique, you can do much with that and remove the potential of the technique. So that's the big reason to understand that also. That's the other thing.
Right. It seems to me like it's just another tool we have to put in our toolbox.
Exactly that.
Um,
Yeah. But remember
because
that I would actually
it's
encourage.
to me, it's like the
Yeah.
whole, the difference between mundane astrologers and Prashna astrologers are like the difference between the people that use North Indian style chart and South Indian style chart. It's like, hey, guess what, y'all? You're supposed to do it all. And
Well,
most
I
people are
can.
lazy,
Right.
right? They're lazy.
Right.
So they don't want to learn
Yeah.
South or they don't want to learn
Yeah.
North. And it's like,
Right.
hello, guess what?
Right.
Do both. You're going to see things in both
Right.
charts that
Right.
you would not have
No.
seen in the others. And so, like,
Yeah.
for instance, lately, what I've been doing is I start out my reading with the South Indian because I see certain things in that and I get started. And then I'll switch to North because I'll just see certain yoga patterns that didn't catch my eye immediately, right? And so I like to use both, And so I think that's how we need to approach Prashna and mundane astrology is you need to do them both and just listen. The hardest thing, I've been listening to Autobiography of a Yogi, the audio book. It's like 20 hours long, right? It's huge. And one of the parts where he talks about astrologers, he says the problem with astrology in India is that the best ones are intuitive. And most of them approach it as, like math and science, that they can just do their calculations and see everything they need to in a chart. And that's not true. Like you have to learn all that stuff. It's just like dancing. You have to learn all that technique and then you have to forget about it once you hit the stage. Once you hit the stage, it's all about using your intuition and all that stuff you learned is in your subconscious. So it just comes out naturally, right? That's why you do your choreography and train and do everything in the studio so that when it's time to perform, it's an art. It's not like a sport, right? And the problem with, I think, a lot of modern astrologers from India is that they approach astrology like a sport instead of an art. And you have to use your intuition.
It is true. What you said is very true. Astrology is having a mathematical component to it. That is true. It is also having an intuitive component to it. But let me elaborate on it further. The thing to remember, the mathematics is actually pointing to intuitive mechanics, and you have to understand both. You really have to understand both. So when you understand both, you begin to see both are one and the same. You'll be surprised by its efficacy. And usually you will be, that's a very simple thing. In fact, you are capable of seeing, now think about that. It's a very simple extension logic. Whatever you are experiencing at this particular moment in time is always a reflection of the planets in the sky. So when the planets change, you experience that anyways. But then you can use techniques like astrology to understand various dimensions of that particular transits also. So even Prashna techniques are basically you are choosing a lagna. Right? That's basically what is happening. But you are understanding this particular energies and this space right now, but from a different perspective. That is that is the advantage of Prashna technique. In fact, like I said, one typical suggestion for all the astrologers out there, when you look at a birth chart, pull a Prashna chart simultaneously. So the birth chart kind of thing that is actually happening based on the dashas and so forth. But then you look at the Prashna chart. Is the Prashna chart indicating some other major planet and so forth? Is there any big yogas being indicated in the Prashna chart?
Exactly. And that is what I've discovered. The best thing about Prashna is that it's pointing to you in the transits where you need to pay attention to in their chart.
Yeah.
Everything is wrong in the Prashna.
Again, it is there in the chart, but it's a completely different system where you can take it all the way. It takes time to develop it. That is very true. But, like I said, this simple technique which I shared, you will be surprised by its efficacy. You will just see, and it was expected. And now then, in fact, I have done this before. I would pull a Prashna chart, I look at the birth chart, and I would make predictions when the client is going to contact me based on the Prashna chart. And then I would actually, then the email will show up exactly when the Prashna chart is being triggered. The next email is again seen from the Prashna chart. In fact, the Prashna chart is very powerful as a technique. You can do a lot of things with it. The moment the Prashna chart is cast, you can make predictions for everything around you. Literally, a dog is coming in this particular time. You can see that.
Right.
In fact, there are very famous predictions. Like there's a famous story of an astrologer saying that, like in one of the Swarna Prashna events, a snake should come in in 10 minutes. Otherwise, I'll burn my book. That's what he said. I'll burn my books. A snake should come in 10 minutes. Everyone was like, okay, let's see what happens. And then an actual snake came in 10 minutes.
Wow.
So you can actually do things like that if you know
Yeah.
the depth. So these Prashna techniques.
Yeah.
But, so remove that. So like you said, it's a technique that will require work. For some people, it might not come naturally. That's completely fine. But you can work on it. The simple way to work on it is like every time you look at any birth chart, look at the Prashna chart. It's a very simple technique. And then you can actually understand a different dimension of the actual birth chart based on the transits, of course. But you understand the technique is kind of different at this point. And then, like I said, the Prashna chart is capable of not only indicating the future things. Now, what happens when the client comes back to you again? You pull a new Prashna chart again. You confirm the problems in the first Prashna chart. You look at the next Prashna chart. And then you see, okay, is that problem solved in the second Prashna chart also? That's the thing. So then you can understand the evolution of the energies for the client from more like an intuitive kind of thing, which is a Prashna, and more like the logical kind of thing, which is a birth chart reading also. So it has that kind of potential also. It's a very powerful thing. Now, in Prashna also, right, so one simple thing I'll just add, and this will be the final thing I have to say on Prashna. When you actually say you don't know your birth time, a simple way astrologers in Kerala will actually answer your question is that they'll ask you a nakshatra. So they'll, okay, so you are born in Pushya, for instance. Then you go and ask an astrology question. Okay, this is the question I have. Will I get a job soon or something like that and all that? So then they'll say, okay, they pull the Prashna chart and they'll ask you a nakshatra. They'll put your nakshatra in the Prashna chart. And then they will actually make predictions based on your nakshatra position in the Prashna chart. So that nakshatra becomes the Chandra Lagna for the chart. You use that particular nakshatra and make predictions for that and so forth. So say your moon is in Pushya, they'll say, so Saturn is right now aspecting moon in Pushya. So there is challenge there for you. That kind of thing you can immediately say. So Prashna chart can also be integrated with birth chart information. That is what is actually happening here. You can use a nakshatra in your chart and make predictions based on that also. That's a very important thing also, because say you have one Prashna chart and there are 9 different people gathered around you. 9 different people might have different 9 nakshatras also, and you can use that. You can have those nine nakshatras, each of those nakshatras pulled up into the Prashna chart and see how that's affecting them also. It's a very simple extension of that technique actually. Yeah. But yeah, the Prashna is very vast. You can go again and again. There's a lot of that. In fact, there are great astrologers, like I said. Once you understand the strength of the prediction, it becomes a tool. We'll have to work at it and so forth. Normally, the text recommended for Prashna is the Prashna Marga book. That is a standard text that is recommended for studying Prashna, actually. But then there is also a very famous text plus Krishniyam. In fact, astrologers were expected to study Prashna Marga if they knew Prashna. They say Prashna Marga is like the clothes, the shawl that you wear on your shoulder when you visit a royal court, because they usually wear a shawl when they visit any court. That's the shawl that you're honored with and all that by the kings. And then they would say Krishniyam is like the jewel that is shining on your neck. So that those two texts are very classics. They have a lot of other Prashna techniques within it, and it's a lifetime study. You might have to spend a long time to study that, but it's worth it. And eventually you'll see the technique itself is growing, helping you grow in a very powerful way. That is also advancing your astrology in very powerful ways also. Now, so Prashna thing is that. So remember that. So that's Prashna is as vast a topic, but many astrologers have derived a lot of various Prashna techniques. In fact, a simple technique I can share is just like pull any Prashna chart. Count the number of houses the Lagna has moved from that particular sign, the Lagna Lord actually. So say right now the Prashna is actually Scorpio. Look at what Mars is doing. So Mars right now is in Cancer as we're talking. So if the Lagna is Scorpio, So you can say if Mars has moved into the 9th house, you can easily make a prediction saying that within 9 days or 9 weeks or 9 months, you can actually expect an answer to your situation.
Well, and also you got what I have found is that because that's kind of iffy. I'm sorry. My experience is that, you know, it's like putting all your eggs in one basket, right? But if it's pointing to Mars, then you want to look to where Mars is traveling, where he's going.
No, that's an excellent point.
Yeah,
Rumbo, so
where
here's
is
the
he
thing.
going in the transits?
Right. So that's very good. So you can make predictions based on the lagna, based on the transits that will impact that particular lagna also. Now, that's a good point. For instance, like you see, say the lagna is right now, let's say Capricorn is the lagna right now. Then the prediction can be made, well, say the lagna is Aquarius right now. The chosen lagna is Aquarius. You say Jupiter is on the lagna right now. So let's say there is luck and fortune for sure, but Saturn is in the 12th house. And then they might say that, you know, in 1 year's time, when Saturn moves over into Aquarius, 1 year's time, there might be, you can see some changes in the situation.
I think that's what works best. I just, you know, because I'm in Simon's cryptocurrency class, all he uses is Prashna. And I've been, you know, keeping track of which predictions are coming true and which aren't. And the ones that always come true are the ones where we take into consideration where whatever in the Prashna chart is strong, we look at to where those planets are going in the future. And then that tells us our answer. For instance, when is this crypto dip going to end, right? I mean, we're in the bottom of the C curve and it just keeps like grounding in higher. It's like, when is it going to go back up, right? Well, all indications from Prashna showed that it was about Jupiter. And when Jupiter comes back with Saturn again in Capricorn in September is probably when the markets are going to go back up. And we just knew from, you know, I forget what it was, but, you know, the amount of months we had to count until things got better. Well, we knew that in September, Jupiter will be going back into Capricorn. So we were like, aha, that's the trigger. That's the thing that's going to make the markets get better. So you have to look at the Prashna in conjunction with, I mean, you're using the transit planet positions, right? So you got to
that is actually
that
is actually part of the Prashna technique. You are expected to look at the transits upon the Prashna chart. So it follows that. So you can even make prediction based on that. So for instance, in the Scorpio ascendant chart, say the Prashna chart of Scorpio, when Mars transits over Scorpio, maybe like in 6 months' time or something like that, you can say at that point, you can expect a real solution.
There you have it. And that's to me, that's the real gold of it, is when you take it into looking to where those transit planets are going.
Remember, but Prashna is always going to reflect the energies of the particular moment. But then the future can be made prediction, you can make the predictions based on that also. Now, Prashna is it's a very vast topic actually. There are, like I said, you know, there was miles and miles to go, you know, and so little time to sleep, right? So that kind of thing. So it's like one of those things actually.
Let's look at the current chart right now, and let's just ask a simple Prashna question.
Okay, yeah,
right?
sure, yeah.
Okay,
so let's see. So
real time, and I'm just going to pull it up, and then I'm going to stop it. That'll be the chart, okay?
Right, okay, great. So here you can see, now the Lagna in this chart is Capricorn. Now, usually in a Prashna technique, if any good planet, any benefic is involved in the Lagna or the 11th house, that is a very strong chart actually. Now, usually they say your desires will be fulfilled. You know, so 11th house is the house of gains. Normally the question is like, will I make some gains? So they say if Mercury is as a planet is aspecting the 11th house, they will say, you know what, you might make some gains. Very easily. They might say, okay, you have, that's a simple technique I can say, you know, in Prashna. 11th house, benefic aspect, great, you'll have some problems sorted out, you will make some money, whatever. Now look at this chart. You can see Saturn is on the Lagna. Moon, a benefic, is also on the Lagna. The Moon and Saturn is forming a Raja Yoga. Moon is the 7th lord conjunct Saturn, which is the first house, right? So whoever is looking at this particular chart right now, this is basically describing their life at this point in time. I can say that. Whoever is viewing this video, literally, you can actually get your answers from this chart. In fact, you can see a couple of things here. Saturn is retrograde in this chart right now. And you know, Capricorn is the ascendant also. And Saturn is actually going backwards, and Saturn is actually on the Lagna, so kind of pointing to a situation that is connected with delays and so forth also. That is one thing. Now, in a Prashna chart, usually you can see that, two different things. Normally, the querent is represented by the first house. The astrologer is indicated by the seventh house. That is a different technique also. Now, look at the planets aspecting the Lagna. So you can see Mars and Venus is also aspecting the Lagna. So you have one malefic aspect, one benefic aspect, which is Venus also, right? So that's a different thing. So you can say there will be a mixed kind of effect that can happen because the Lagna is getting an aspect of malefic Mars. Lagna is also getting the aspect of benefic Venus. Now, what is interesting about this malefic Mars is that you see this particular a very special kind of Raj Yoga called as Neech Panga Raj Yoga being formed. Mars is in Kendra, it is debilitated, which is Nicha, but then Nicha position is getting Banga, or Neech Banga is being formed because Moon, the sign lord of Cancer, is actually in Kendra to Mars. So that is one Neech Banga Raj Yoga between Moon and Mars.
Another one.
Exactly that.
Saturn
And you can see Saturn.
And in
Saturn in
its
its own
right now, ruled by the moon.
Yeah. Saturn is in its own sign, and Shravana, you can say that it is actually aspecting Mars also. So that is also one more condition for Neech Banga Raj Yoga. So the debilitation of Mars is being cancelled, as it's called, in two different ways. But again, remember this debilitation is cancelled on account of moon-like factors, which is seventh lord, seventh house, supporting factors, and Saturn-like factors, which is the first lord and second lord in this chart. First lord is your own self and so forth. Second house is the house of resources. So your resources might support you right now. That is one easy way to look at that. Now, what is interesting is that Saturn is retrograde here. Now, to add the transits which you said, when Saturn as the planet moves exactly over this point, moves exactly over 20 degrees of Shravana in the future, at that point you can expect some kind of real movement to whatever you have in mind right now. The Saturn is retrograde right now. Now, remember the transits of the Prashna Lagna is important also. So exactly that. That is one easy way to analyze that. Now, there is the other way also to look at this. So the other technique is that in a Prashna chart, I can share simple techniques. Look at where the sun and moon are placed in the chart also. The houses where the sun is sitting in is going to be important. The house where the moon is sitting in will also be important. It's a simple thing. Now, when the houses where Rahu and Ketu is sitting in is pointing to karmic tendencies coming from multiple lifetimes. Rahu is in 5th house in this chart. So you can see right now we are studying about astrology, You can literally see that. Rahu being with Mercury also. Mercury is the 9th lord. So there's a teacher that is involved also. You're studying with a teacher also. Easily that can be seen. So Rahu being with Mercury is pointing to that. Now, remember that, Rahu is indicating karma of occult nature also. Now, say Rahu is in the 12th house or in the 6th house. You can say you might have a karma with a hidden enemy. There might be a competition kind of thing there. That is a thing you might see. Now, Ketu is in the 11th house. Ketu is in the 11th house, which is pointing to the past life karma associated with gains. That is one thing to look at that. Now the other aspect here is that a very simple technique you can look at is also look at where the what the ascendant lord of the Prashna chart is going. So Saturn is in the 1st house. Normally you can say, but if you carefully look at the ascendant degrees, you see the ascendant degree is 20 degrees. Saturn is actually 18 degrees also.
Right.
So that is also pointing to this particular fact that something could have happened slightly before, the actual Lagna. So before this particular question was being asked, something could have happened before, which could actually indicate some answers also. Now the other way to look at that is that you can see the 1st house or the 1st day or the 1st week could also have some answers, or the 13th day or the 13th week or the 13th month could also have some answers.
Why the 13th? Because the moon being at 13 degrees?
So remember the first plan, moon is in the 1st house actually. The 1st house or 1st day or the 1st week is indicated by the 1st day, 1st week, 1st month is indicated by the 1st house. 2nd day, 2nd week, 2nd month is indicated by the 2nd house. And then you can see that again, you can go around the chart and see and all that. And then again, the 13th day, you will go around the chart and reach the 1st house again after the 12 houses. Yeah, exactly that. So that is one answer you can expect. It's a simple thing. And then, of course, you can look at the nakshatra also. A simple technique for the advanced students out there, I can say, look at what the nakshatra lord is doing. So, Ashwin nakshatra is Shravana, and Moon is the nakshatra lord. Now, Moon is also in the first house. So, you can expect some real answers on the first day, or like, in the 13th day, 13th week, and so forth. That is also one more thing I can say. Now, here you can see two different things. Venus in Pushya and Mars in Pushya is aspecting the Lagna. So even what we are doing right now should be seen from the Prashna chart. You should be able to do that. And we can see that there is learning happening. Mars, like I said, is a planet for Prashna. Mercury with Rahu is also another planet for Prashna.
Why is Mars the planet for Prashna?
Yeah, so Prashna means two things, So Prashna can means actually a question. Prashna can also mean, they call it like a problem also. Mars is a problem solver. Mars is an engineer, So a question can be indicated by Mercury, and Mars can be indicating the problem that you're trying to solve. So usually I've seen people with strong Mars.
The doer.
So they are kind of good with Prashna. I've seen that. You have planets in Scorpio, Aries, you have strong Mars in your chart, Mars influence in your chart, you might be able to use Prashna effectively. That's a real thing I've seen. And usually I recommend for people with strong Mars to study Prashna also. You have your 8th lord in connection with Mars. You have the 8th house falling with Mars, rule signs. Or even like you can say if you have the 8th lord influenced by Mars or a strong Mars in your chart, I would definitely encourage those natives to study Prashna because they're capable of giving remedy, they're capable of giving Prashna-based solutions also. But yeah, that is one way how you can do that. The other interesting thing, you can see now what are the other transits that can happen onto the chart. So Jupiter can easily move back into the Lagna in September end also, and Jupiter moves back into Capricorn. So that's an actual time when also, so like 3 months from now, to combine the transits with this particular Prashna chart, you can make some prediction based on that also. So those are some simple techniques. So Sun, Moon, Rahu, Ketu, and the Ascendant Lord. And that's the easiest thing. And the 11th house kind of thing, the Nakshatra Lord in the chart, all of the very simple techniques. But I can really encourage that. You'll be surprised to see that your questions will be answered. Now, I remember I can recall 2 instances when I use a Prashna chart. One chart was that of someone recently came by to ask some question about if they could start a business or so. That was when Mercury was actually right now. That chart actually had a Scorpio ascendant, and Moon was in Pushya or Ashlesha on that day. And Moon Mars was in 9th house also. So then I had to ask them. Now here's the interesting thing. So I asked them, was there any? It's good. I just made this remark that it would be very good for you to feed cats because Moon is in Ashlesha. Right, Ashlesha, the animal is cats. So Moon was in Ashlesha, Mars was in Ashlesha. So you strengthen your Mars by strengthening the Moon because Neech Banga is happening with Moon, Mars in the Cancer, and all that. Now this person made an interesting remark. This person said that some years ago there was a cat that died in my home, and just like appeared in front of my home and just died there. Then I had to bury it and so forth. Now, it was interesting. I asked it whether it was now. Remember, Moon and Mars are in 9th house. I asked it, was it like 4 to 5 years ago? He said, yeah, around that time period. Why was I able to say that? Right. So you can go backward in time also. So if right now is the Lagna, the year before is actually the 12th house. The 2 years before that is actually the 11th house. 3 years before that is the 10th house. 4 years before was the 9th house. So that is a simple thing. So literally that you could see that literally playing out. So not only you can read the past of a situation and you can read the future of the situation also. Then I told them you will definitely get an answer in 9 months' time. I can really see big actions coming for you in 9 months' time. Why? Simply because Mars is going into the 9th house. The Lagna Lord was going to 9th house. And I told him you have to wait, plan for things that you can move forward. Right now, Corona kind of thing is too much. You might have to plan it out for a longer time period and so forth. And we talked about that. But surprising thing, like I said, is that I could see his entire family from that particular chart. So I would ask him, okay, what is the situation with your first child? What is the situation with the second child? All that you could see just from the 5th house and the 7th house of the chart and all that.
Right.
So it's very, very lot of things. But yeah, remember, it just takes practice. Believe me, once you use this, it will become a very powerful tool
Okay, so
in your
now the ascendant
astrological
is
skill set.
Ganesha. Okay, so
Mhm.
I'm going to ask a question.
Sure, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
My question is, my question is the coronavirus going to get worse?
Okay, so pull a new Prashna chart right now.
Okay, so here. Okay, right now. There it is.
Okay, so the question was, is coronavirus going to get worse? Okay, so you have now Prashna. Remember, when you create a Prashna chart, you can also look at the divisional charts also. You can look at the divisional charts or the Prashna chart. So here you can see in the Navamsha chart, the Lagna is actually going to Leo with Magha with Venus there. So the Navamsha chart is actually, Navamsha Lagna is actually going to the 8th house in the chart. That's an easy way. So Lagna, as you can see, Lagna is falling in Capricorn. The Navamsha Lagna is basically in Leo. Leo is actually the 8th house in the original Prashna chart. So one simple thing is that there will be an 8th house kind of result that is expected within 8 months' time. That's a very simple technique, but you can use that. There'll be a challenge there. Definitely there'll be a challenge there. Of course, Saturn is on the Lagna, so there will be some challenge. It's not over yet. Saturn has to transit and clear that up. In fact, Dhanishta is also the Lagna, which is connected with a pattern of sorts, so with a rhythm and so forth also. Not Dhanishta Nakshatra is a Lagna. You can see Mars is in Pushya, so there might be a challenge there. So there might be some people, you can see Mars, the Nakshatra Lord is going into Cancer, which is the natural house associated with lungs also. So you can see that people now is, if you have a weak heart or weak lungs kind of thing, then yeah, definitely it's a challenge. So people with weak heart or weak lungs definitely need to watch out for it. I can say that you might need to work on it, strengthen that Mars, strengthen that lungs kind of thing, strengthen your breathing kind of thing. Easily you can
What
say
about
that.
the gut though? Because it seems like
Mhm.
after it bypasses your lungs, it stays in your gut, and that's where it
Wow,
kills.
really? Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That is one more thing you can see that. I think, in my opinion, Sun is in the 6th house of gut also. That's right. And Rahu Mercury also, right? Rahu Mercury in the 5th house region, which is like below heart and close to that and all that. So yeah, gut region, stomach, that is also going to be very important. Having a routine with that will be important. But to answer the question, I can say usually, there will be a challenge there, because what is, I also looked in Navamsha in this particular chart. Remember that. That also important thing. Right now in this particular system which we applied, in which we are also applying the nakshatras of the Prashna. Now, normally, an astrologer would not look at the nakshatras. They, at the most, they might look at the Navamsha. They will look at the Navamsha positions of the. In Kerala astrology, you don't. The concept of Lagna Nakshatra is not applicable. You can just say, put it that way, because they don't. They only use 12 Rashis to determine the Lagna, the Prashna chart. You'll find most of the books are actually giving predictions based on the Rashi-based Lagna and so forth also. But Nakshatra-based Prashna is a completely new concept that I can definitely say that. But you can use that. You can actually apply that also.
I mean, for sure. I mean, what stands out to me is that Saturn retrogrades in Ardra in the 11th house. And then over here in this part, in the 6th house of health, we've got Sun in Ardra. And that harkens back to when Rahu was in Ardra last year when the pandemic started. Neptune, I mean, that could be, this is drugs, not just pharmaceutical drugs are Neptune as well, not just illicit, street drugs, right? And I've always found in people's charts, if they have Neptune retrograde in the 2nd house, if there weren't illicit drugs in the home when they were a child, then they were on pharmaceutical drugs, some disease, like I had one client who was swept up in a tornado. It was like the biggest tornado in Indiana in like 50 years. And the first, her whole 2nd house of her life was her taking nebulizers and things for her lungs, right?
Okay.
So I think it's going to come back. I think that, it's going to, when Jupiter goes back into Capricorn, I think it's going to come back. And then by the time Jupiter goes back into Aquarius in November, then we're going to be finally on the tail end and coming out of, you know, the thicket. So, so I keep telling people, you know, just be careful, keep, you know, doing everything. You still wear your mask, still social distance, wash your hands, stay away from people until the end of the year, basically. And we're not out of it until next year, you know.
Right now we are in the month of June. I think the time period to watch out will be 2 months from now, which is like July and August. August month will be one time period to watch out.
The ascendant as June, and then July, August, September.
Remember that.
Right?
So today's date is June 26th actually. So ascendant is June 26th to July 26th actually. That's a simple way to look at that. The second month will be July 26th to August 26th. Third month will be August 26th to September 26th. So that's the third house, ruled by Jupiter as retrograde in a Marka position. Jupiter is also the 12th lord in the chart. That's one thing to watch out for. And then, like I said, August 26th to September 26th is the fourth month. September 26th to October 26th, definitely a Rahu month. You can see a Rahu, Mercury in the 5th house and all that. So that'll be some problem that can happen at that point. So that's something to watch out for. It's a 5th house month. It won't be that bad, but still it's having the 6th lord Mercury there. So that could be when something like that could happen. I think the 6th month from right now. So that point will be important. Now remember, Sun is the 8th lord in the chart. Sun is in Ardha right now. At that point, the question that, you know, there could be some intense situations happening around that time period. So it's like June, let's see, June, July, August, September, October, November 26 to December 26, actually, around that time period. And then you have the 7th house month will be the more challenging month because Mars is also there. So, you know, Mars will be, it's debilitated. But remember, it's Neech Bhanga. Neech Bhanga is basically Mars getting after the moon and Saturn.
I always get that from over here, but you know what? Personally, I don't think anything's 100% canceled.
Yeah, no,
I
you're
don't
right.
care what anybody says. It's
exactly.
still
No, you're
there.
actually right. Yeah.
It's just getting help from Saturn being in its own sign and Moon being the ruler.
That's correct. Right. One, as some astrologers actually say, you have to go through Nietzsche effects first before the Bhangas actually felt also. So you have to go through a debilitation thing and then it gets cancelled. You know, so it's not completely cancelled as you correctly said, but you'll have to. The sequence will also play out. Yeah, it will definitely be worse initially, but then it will get better afterwards also because of the Neech Bhanga thing in the chart also. Usually I would advise, Moon with Saturn on the Lagna, usually I would advise traveling mothers in general. Traveling mothers who travel. People who travel or even family who travel also. That is the thing I would say, but the 7th month from now is when I would actually give the advice based on this Prashna chart. I think the rest is fine, but like the 5th month, the thing will be in the news and all that. 5th month from now,
that's November. Yeah, and then by December.
So that'll be, At
that point, I think people are just so excited to be able to travel again, but they don't realize that it's too soon.
No, right. I can encourage Saturn being with Moon. The remedy is going to be Saturn and Moon, and also the remedy is going to be Mars and Venus. So like doing a practice for Shiva, like the Mahamrityunjaya Japa is very excellent. I recommend that for as a remedy. And then Mars is also Hanuman, and Saturn is also linked with Hanuman. So you can actually chant or listen to Hanuman mantras, which is very protective. I can really encourage that. Hanuman Narasimha mantra also. That also I can encourage. That is also one more thing I can encourage and so forth. That'll be fine. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to stop the share.
Right.
Let's go ahead and finish this up, and we're actually going to do something fun after this. I won't tell you though until the next video. But we're going to work with Prashna a bit more in the next video. But yeah, I think this is a great overview of, horary astrology. Just, if you haven't dabbled in it much, then just start playing with it. Ask a question, pull up the chart of the moment, use some of these simple techniques. There's so much information online about it. But really, I think Prashna is really dependent upon your intuition as well. So if something is getting your attention in that chart, pay attention to it. You know, plug it into the birth chart you're working with. Plug it into the Navamsha, you know, just kind of superimpose these charts and see where things line up. That's something that I've really learned from you that I don't get as much from other astrologers, is superimposing and seeing where things line up and just follow, you know, follow the hot spots. You know, they're lining up for a reason. And, you know, I think just using a couple of these techniques in conjunction with what you already do will strengthen your base knowledge. So, you know, definitely use these. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact Santhip or myself, and we can lead you to the right materials or whatever you need for your learning.
Sure. No, that's great. Great, Katya.
Yeah. And as always, if you like the video, please click the like button, subscribe to my channel. We'll have more videos like this up. And if you're interested in how to deal with debilitated planets in your chart, or if you need any meditation tools, you can go to my shop. I have different products up. I have the Navagraha aromatherapy elixirs, and they are perfumes that go with each planet to help that planet, you know, to bring it into balance. I have gemstone bracelets that are that go with all of the Navagraha. And then now I have the Navagraha Yantra Cosmic Healing Discs. And these are gorgeous glass encapsulated yantra pictures for each graha. And they are encapsulated with a copper band. And the copper acts as a superconductor so that as you are doing your meditation and gazing at the disc, you can also shine a light on it. It activates really well that way. You know, that pattern gets into your consciousness, it gets into your body. You know, if you know anything about cymatics, you know, the metal plate, putting the sand on top, putting the electrode attached to it to a music frequency, and you can see the pattern, the sacred geometry patterns in the music show up in the sand, right? So you are just like that. Your body is full of water. So whatever frequency you put into it, it's going to show up in the patterns of your own water. And so that's why using these tools will really enhance your meditation time and accelerate your healing. So if you're interested, I will put the link down in the comments. And yeah, thank you so much, Santhip, for another wonderful session. I learned so much with you, and I know I get so many great comments from people saying how much they get out of your videos. So thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you again, Katya.
Thank you, Santhip. Okay.
Yeah.
Till next time. Bye.